The European Union, with its Green Deal agenda, has set very, very high ambitions with CSRD, so the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive. Companies now have to report on their emissions from business travel. So, with this scrutiny also comes a lot more action. So I would say that at the end of the day, business travel is a global industry. So we'll probably see a lot of these push with European Union regulation gain traction, like across the globe, or even like companies based outside of Europe being subject to these obligations.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. Before we begin this week's episode, a special shout out to our exclusive sponsors for September, S2Air. S2Air is an aviation and climate data platform that helps airlines make more informed choices, especially about their non-CO2 impact. It's one of the few things airlines can do today to reduce their climate impact. So go check it out, S2Air, E-S-T-U-A-I-R-E. My guest today is Delphine Millot. Delphine is the Managing Director of GBTA Foundation, as well as the SVP for Advocacy and Sustainability for GBTA, which stands for the Global Business Travel Association. Delphine represents the interests of the business travelers, the most profitable customers of airlines, and in general, the aviation business. Delphine and I speak about what it will take to make business travel more sustainable, what efforts the business travel industry is doing, and how the GBTA and the GBTA Foundation are leading some of these businesses into sustainability. Delphine, fantastic to be speaking with you. You came up with a research recently showing that in a poll of 150 travel managers in the US, just 8% said that sustainability was a priority. Given this figure is so low, are you concerned about your role that you'll be playing in the industry?
So, like the stats you're referencing came from a poll that we conducted in March of last year. The results is explained by the fact that the question was to travel managers, pick your two top priorities, when managing programs. So what came out first was cost saving, followed by the traveler experience. And after that, it was policy enforcement and risk management. And sustainability came in fifth. I would say, this is not surprising because travel managers are there, to look after travel programs, duty of care, budgets. It doesn't mean that they do not care for sustainability. This is, in the grand scheme of things, something new for travel managers. It's only recently that they've had to care about the carbon footprint of their program. And since then, we also came up with more tailored research. We had a report on the state of climate action on business travel. And if you ask the question differently, if you ask travel managers, is sustainability important for your organization and important for your travel program? It's 90% of our 850 respondents globally that say it's important, So again, with surveys, polls, it's all about how you ask the questions. But I would very much say that the awareness is there for travel managers. The issue is how do you balance sustainability with costs, with risks, and with a lot of other priorities?
Oh, I think we'll be touching upon all of these, but I think the homework for your team is to rephrase the question next time to make sure that it's a bit more, reflective of the sentiment. Let's just say. Uh, let's talk about GBTA Foundation itself. What is the GBTA Foundation? We know how GBTA works and how it supports the interests of the business travelers. What is GBTA Foundation and what's your role in it?
So the GBTA Foundation is the charitable arm of GBTA, the association. Again, it's the ecosystem of business, travel industry players and professionals on the supply and buy side coming together to drive goods not only for the industry, but also for the people and our planet. So really the GBTA Foundation is where we host and we run a number of programs. On the people side, it's about workforce development, women empowerment. And on the planet side, it's about, addressing the climate challenge and making sure that we play our part when it comes to climate action and driving the uptake of sustainable practices. And so I do manage the overall foundation. And in addition to that, I'm also responsible for advocacy and lobbying efforts with GBTA, because the two kind of work hand in hand when we're looking at collaborating with stakeholders to tackle these big macro challenges for the industry.
Now, I want to dive right into the business travel side of things. Business travel is often accused of, being responsible for most of the emissions in aviation. Do you think business aviation can serve as a catalyst for driving change when it comes to climate?
And, I think we play our fair share of the emissions. This is for sure. And again, one of the difference between leisure travel and business travel is there's really less of an element of choice when it comes to corporate travel. Employees are being asked to travel as part of their jobs. It's part of what they have to do. I'd say, the opportunity that we see is business travel is very concentrated. There is a lot more, investment power that we can coordinate with, this demand signal that we can send to the industry. So we can play, even more than our fair share in terms of the solution. And it's really realizing this, that we've set up our program. And I know probably we're going to talk about sustainable aviation fuels, about, supplier engagement. But we realize that actually business travel is a key part of the solution when we look at investments in decarbonization.
So let's talk about specifically some of the initiatives you have been leading. For example, the GBTA Foundation has committed to releasing a global sustainable procurement criteria by the end of this year. How will this criteria help drive more sustainable practices in business travel?
So this is what I was, talking about when we talk about, concentrated purchasing power. So the global business travel sector is, on average, a $1.4 trillion annually in spend. And a lot of this, goes to hotels, car rentals, but also to air travel. So we realize that, if we can shift this demand signal towards suppliers that are recognized as more sustainable, this is sending, a clear market signal. So when we realized that, we had this power and this level of action, we've been putting together this commitment. So we pledged this with the United States, like the White House. We were part of an announcement with the Biden-Harris administration on sustainable travel, and also with the European Union. We're part of the transition pathway for travel and tourism. And what we said we would be doing is releasing standards that relate to sustainable travel procurement this year for all of the key verticals of business travel. So back in March, we released our sustainable procurement standards for aviation. Just last month in June, we released our sustainable procurement standards for hotels. And in the fall, we're going to release the sustainable standards for ground transportations and car rentals. And at the end of the day, what this is, it's really common language in terms of what questions travel buyers should be asking their suppliers when it comes to their sustainability efforts, looking at things and areas that are really material and will help move the needle when we are looking, at emission reductions.
This is very interesting. I did not realize, but I appreciate this now, that you don't just deal with airlines, you deal with hotels, car rentals, the entire ecosystem of travel, because ultimately you don't just take a flight, you stay at a hotel, you rent a car. How do these standards differ for an airline versus a hotel? Very different businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. So that's why, when we are looking at these solutions, when we talk about sustainable business travel, it's very important for us to have all of the verticals around the same table. So in our sustainability leadership council, we have, chief sustainability officer from the airlines, hotels, car rentals, because we are looking at, what are collective actions we can drive. When it comes to specific decarbonization solutions, what needs to happen for an airline versus a hotel or, a car rental company is broadly very different. So this is when we looked at the standards. We could not tell buyers to ask the same question to an airline or to a hotel. For aviation, we're very, very focused on emissions and, the carbon impacts of aviation. When it's a hotel, emissions is incredibly important, but we're looking a lot more at impacts on biodiversity, waste and water, etc. So that's really why we felt the need when it comes to the standards to have different sets for different verticals.
I wonder if airlines can learn something that hotels and car rental companies are doing right when it comes to procuring and working with Scope 3 suppliers.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the initiative is, again, solutions are different, but then because of the unique challenges of certain verticals, they gain to learn from the others. And, when it comes to plastic reductions, like hotels have been, doing a lot very early. And it's also very important for airlines to be looking at plastic reduction as well. So there's a lot to learn when it comes to electrification of ground transport, like hotels also need to have their charging stations. So we're really promoting the idea that this is an ecosystem of travel and also building the understanding that the success of one vertical is going to be the success of every vertical. When we're talking about sustainable aviation fuels, hotels have to care because it's these planes that are bringing travelers to the hotels. So, it's about, the entire sector working together, understanding the needs, the solutions, and, contributing to these solutions.
It's so interesting. I have not met a hotelier who is interested to talk about SAF, but they should be interested, right? When you say travel buyers, who are your travel buyers? Who is the customer here?
So the travel buyers they are the procurement leads for the travel category in large multinationals that have managed travel programs. So, they are negotiating this preferred agreement with their preferred airlines, preferred hotels. So they are, like procurement human beings. They are also travel managers in company that are in charge of, managing these travel programs. They are in charge of, making sure employees go safely from point A to point B, and they know at all times where the traveler are, and, what means of transports they've taken to fulfill their business trips.
It's very, very interesting because I'm thinking these guys control a lot of budgets, way more than an individual person would be spending in a year, for example, because these are large organizations that they're, procuring travel for. And now connecting back to your first point, now it makes sense why have a procurement strategy, right?
Yes, that it's incredible to see, for some companies, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent, every year on travel. And it's not only the private sector. We're also talking about governments. One of the biggest spender in terms of business travel is the Department of Defense in the US. So, it's governments also traveling for work, nonprofits and multinationals, it's across the board.
Do governments take you seriously? Like, do they follow your recommendations on procurement, for example?
Yes, they do. Actually, after we released our sustainable procurement standards, we've been contacted by GSA in the US, so the US government, to see how they can integrate our standards to their own strategy, and also a few public tender agencies in the Nordics in Europe. They realize that we've done a lot of the work on their behalf. And also what really builds a lot of gravitas and credibility around our standards is that we put, the buyers, the suppliers, the intermediaries, everyone around the same table. So we didn't decide this is what good looks like. It's coming from the industry and from parts of the industry that certainly sometimes do not have the same, like sense of or like level of ambition. So it took 18 months, for instance, for us to be able to release our procurement standards on aviation. We had all of the major airlines around the table contributing expertise through their sustainability team, but also the buyers telling us what they need in terms of information that supports their procurement. Also, travel management companies are a key part in this, business travel ecosystem.
Right. It's such a fascinating ecosystem, right? Most people think Google Flights, just book a flight. It's very B2C, but this is where a bulk of profits for airlines and hotels are coming from. This is where the bulk of demand is coming from. And that's why the work you're doing is suddenly so important.
Yes, indeed. And also like these booking platforms are different. They are showing also different offers than, like a leisure, like a booking platform would see. But this is also where I would say, in addition to the aggregating, purchasing power, something that's also a key lever for change, impact and action with business travel is the point of booking, because employees book within a certain travel policy. So you can have mandates. If under a certain number of hours, you want to mandate a train instead of a flight, you can do that. You can mandate the lowest emission flight. Once we're going to be at the stage where, emissions data is being displayed and, accurate and transparent. So you can really push your employees to, or force them, to select, these most sustainable, travel options.
Do you think it is more useful for these mandates by employers to be about a sustainable organization or a sustainable instance? I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm flying from, you go to Paris often, from New York to Paris. And do you foresee a mandate saying fly the airline with the lowest emissions, because obviously you can't take a train? Or should it be, regardless of your flight right now, fly the organization with the least scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, and hence they might look very different, because you may fly an A380, which is a guzzler, for your flight, but the organization may be investing in electric aircraft. They may be taking care of scope 3 emissions. They may have no single-use plastic on board, and hence making a big difference. What's more important, and do you think the mandates can come there?
So I would not say at the level, of the overall sustainability efforts and energy and performance of an airline. We're really talking about mandates from a travel policy perspective, but it's going to be, again, back to companies deciding to enter in contract with airlines that are more sustainable. So, when you look at the sustainable procurement standards for aviation, they include all of these questions. The procurement lead is asking an airline, what are you doing to, invest into SAF? What are you doing to invest in more efficient, aircraft? What are you doing, to research the impacts of contrails and non-SOE2 effects? So we are definitely encouraging companies to, enter in commercial relationship with airlines that are more sustainable overall. And at the same time, it doesn't prevent from them to also have, nudging with their booking tool in terms of more sustainable flight as well. I think what's going to be impactful is to look at both down the line.
It's very interesting. It's a question I often think about. So I was curious to hear your views on this as well. What do you see as the role of SAF? We touched upon sustainable aviation fuel earlier. What do you think SAF can do in reducing the environmental impact of business travel specifically?
Sustainable aviation fuel is one of the most promising way to decarbonize aviation. Like in the short to medium term, there's no question about it. Now we are aware of all of the barriers in terms of building this new market, scaling it, and realizing that this is one of the most promising solution. We have to play our, share in terms of scaling this market. So we had a real strong call to action on our, business travel community in terms of corporate sending this demand signal. This is taking the form, of purchase of SAF certificates. And we definitely want companies to explore this. It's also helping companies, down the line, business travel will continue to happen. It's essential. It's vital for companies. And they also have these ambitious SBTI targets. So I would say we're in a different situation, depending on, the materiality of business travel emissions for a certain company. So for some, companies where it's heavy manufacturing, down the line, business travel will be a small share of their total emissions. But for a lot of companies who are active, members of GBTA, it can represent more than half. Sometimes it's 80% of emissions that come from scope 3 category 6, which is business travel. So there, like these companies will have to invest in sustainable aviation fuel certificates if they are to meet their net zero targets and SBTI targets. There's no way around it. So for us, it's about getting, the clarity, transparency around all the accounting around SAF, because at the moment, this is creating a bit of paralysis in terms of the corporate sector being able to invest more or accelerating faster. So we're really pushing, with GHG protocol, with SBTI to get this clarity, because our position is that these, environmental attribute certificates from SAF companies should be able to use those to, claim reductions and abatement of their scope 3 emissions from business travel.
This is so interesting. I'm very curious. What are some examples of companies where scope 3 emissions category 6 business travel is more than 50 or 60%?
So this would be financial services, professional services, like a lot of big consulting firm, that have, to travel for their clients. And what's interesting is that it's also becoming scope 3 for their own clients. So there is this kind of, triple accountability related to air travel emissions. But we're seeing quite a few sectors, and the big consulting firms is definitely an area where we've seen up to 80% of emissions coming from scope 3.6.
Wow. I can't wait for a large consulting company to announce a huge SAF purchase very soon, perhaps at Farnborough Air Show. We shall see.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of offtake agreements were driven by, consulting firms. When, we've seen, and consulting firms, and again, it's are you looking at reducing the global, the emissions from your global travel program or for your travel program in a given country? We've seen a consulting firm in the Netherlands that is, buying 100% of SAF to just, abate all of their emissions from business travel. So we've seen actually a lot of traction. What's great is that there are several, purchasing options and mechanisms available for corporates. They can join, buyer alliances. They can collaborate with their airlines. They can go directly to producers. They can use book and claims through their travel management companies. So there are lots of options out there. It remains, it's a budget, it's an investment. So it requires planning and buy-in from executives in these companies to see what needs to happen.
The more I learn about this area, the more I'm fascinated, and I want to see some action and I want to see some of the results that come through as well. Does the traveler sentiment differ compared to regions? Because I believe some of your research shows how European travel buyers are more likely to have ownership of reducing carbon emissions themselves compared to other regions. Why do you think this is the case?
So that's indeed the case in all of our, like state of climate action barometers. Like Europe is the region leading the way. There are more awareness. Overall, there's more being done to address these emissions. I would say, there's part of it can be cultural, with just more awareness overall, through the media, through a lot of things. I would also say the infrastructure plays a role, when we look at the rail infrastructure in Europe and, like having options to like minimize emissions on short distance journeys, this is also explaining why people are taking these options. They're much more multimodality. But down the line, and having worked in governments and government relations for a long time, I would say that the scrutiny and the regulation that we're seeing in Europe is also, like driving a lot of these. The European Union, with its Green Deal agenda, has set very, very high ambitions with CSRD, so the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive. Companies now have to report on their emissions from business travel. So, with this scrutiny also comes a lot more action. So I would say that at the end of the day, business travel is a global industry. So we'll probably see a lot of these push with European Union regulation gain traction, like across the globe, or even like companies based outside of Europe being subject to these obligations. So I think we're going to see, like a level playing field more and more globally. But again, sometimes this is dependent on politics as well in given regions. For us as a global organization, we want also to respect the fact that every region will move at their own pace and with different, solutions also linked to their infrastructure. So we really don't want to preach, like Europe is the model. Every region should follow Europe. It's not going to happen that way. So we're keen to, like gather best practices from other regions as well.
I wonder what you think about the recent surcharge that Air France and Lufthansa have imposed. Because yes, it is applicable to everyone. I think it's 24 euros for Air France, 72 euros for Lufthansa flights. Yes, it is applicable to everyone, but primarily those paying will be the price insensitive customers, which is business travelers. Do you think this is the right way to do it? Do you think that we're going to see more airlines passing what's being led by European airlines?
So we had so many discussions with our member around these surcharges, and the understanding is that yes, very likely we'll see more and more of these surcharges, and they're not only going to be related to regulatory mandates. Is yes, like there's a premium for sustainable aviation fuel, and this premium is going to be passed on to the travelers. It's been like a lot of comments have been around the fact that at the end of the day, there should be a lot more advance notice and warning and collaboration in terms of airlines, like announcing such really like we're not talking about a few cents or dollars, like these are big amounts. So it's, having more notice to be able to predict budgets, and also what corporates are trying to do, especially when they participate in these SAF certificates purchasing programs, is that they want to be able to get the attributes. So they are happy to invest, but then they want to get the means to be able to report on reductions from their own companies. So there have been discussions about the need not to pay twice, and also, having clarity on the entire, again, we're going back to the accounting system that needs to be transparent. And there's going to be a differentiation also in terms of the corporate role between what airlines are doing and passing on in terms of costs linked to mandates and what is additional to this. And I think this is when corporates have a role to play. It's what's additional to the mandates, because we really need to accelerate the pace. Like really, right now, time is the enemy. I think overall we're looking at pathways forging in terms of decarbonizing aviation, but we need to advance much faster. So, it's going to be around building that momentum to make sure that, there's transparency, accountability, notice, and down the line collaboration between the airlines and their key customers.
Wow, I don't know how airlines will be collaborating because they tend to compete often. But, just like safety, I think sustainability is one area in which you can collaborate, as you rightly said. What about travel managers collaborating with their company's sustainability teams? How do you think that partnership can be to drive meaningful change?
So this collaboration, we've seen it is already happening because, again, travel managers are travel and procurement experts. They are not sustainability experts. I think they are becoming sustainability experts for many of them. But, travel managers are there to be able to collect information in terms of, the carbon footprint of the travel, the transport, the hotels. They're also there to make sure that they build, a sustainable travel program in the sense of optimizing travel decisions from their travelers. When it comes to setting targets in terms of, what is the path for the overall emission reductions of a company, this has to be led by the sustainability teams. So I would argue that, in a lot of organizations, we're seeing this collaboration for companies that have, again, this small share of emissions from business travel. I think travel managers can become advocates for the need to also look after travel emissions. They can bring that to their sustainability teams and say, hey, you know what? Even if this is, less than 1% of our emissions, there are actually ways we can do better. So we would love to be using the travel managers as advocates to relay this message to their sustainability team. And in other companies, it's also been working the other way around where, travel lead, sustainability leads will say, okay, we have these SBTI targets. We need to reduce our business travel emissions. Let's collaborate with travel managers to make it happen.
This is quite heartening to hear that such collaboration is already happening. This is not something proposed. And ultimately, this can lead to more business for the travel manager as well. There have been talk about artificial intelligence. Let's talk about technology and how artificial intelligence can potentially supplement the role of the travel managers. Is there any application on the sustainability front for this?
Yes. So the answer is yes. And it's very promising. So we've seen a lot of new companies in our, business travel ecosystem that are using AI to generate, better data, and predictive analysis in terms of sustainable business travel, that gets embedded to the corporate booking tool to be able to help these decisions. So we're seeing a lot of, great use of AI technology. Something we're working on with GBTA is that we would love to see more harmonization when it comes to the methodologies that are being used to calculate these emissions. Because again, it's great to have, more detailed data, but we need to be comparing apples to apples. And this is something, that's happening through the industry, through industry collectives, and also through regulations like in Europe. But that's, ensuring that the tools are there, but like the principles behind the technology are there as well.
This is definitely going to be an interesting space to watch how AI supplements the travel manager's role, and sustainability is definitely a good area to look into for that. How about the non-CO2 climate impacts? Do travel managers currently have a way to account for and inform their clients of the non-CO2 climate impacts of aviation in their sustainability strategies?
So Yes, the answer, yes, there are a lot of discussions in our circles about, the non-CO2 climate impacts of aviation. It's a high priority for sure for the airlines, and also for the travel managers. We've seen a lot of calculation tools that include radiative forcing. So we'll, apply this factor of, 2 or 3 times, the emissions to include radiative forcing. The tricky part is that the science is very inconclusive in terms of, applying a blanket factor on emissions. We know that these contrails are formed, at certain altitude, like it's different by day, by night. So we're looking at ways to have much more granular data. So what we're looking at the moment is that, when there is radiative forcing, there is, this can be triggered or untriggered. We are encouraging our buyer members to ask their airlines what they are doing to support, academic and nonprofit research on non-CO2 impacts, because they're very important, and we need to tackle all of the climate impacts of aviation, CO2 and non-CO2. But we're on a bit of a watching brief at the moment, because we're finding it's a very difficult issue that probably needs more research.
I will be watching with much interest. What are some of the new or interesting projects you're working for the future of sustainable travel in general?
So for us, the next big milestone is actually around the corner in September. We're going to launch an acceleration challenge for the global business travel industry. We've been collaborating with Accenture as a knowledge partner, and we've developed a pathway around, levers of actions that we've identified. So there are 4. It's about target setting, emission tracking, and reporting. It's around travel decisions and activation of, the features at the point of booking. It's about supplier engagement and sustainable procurement. And it's also about investments in sustainable aviation fuel. So we've developed a pathway. When we're going to launch in September, what we're going to do is that we're going to encourage corporates around the globe to take a maturity assessment based on this pathway. This is going to give them a company score. Again, we're not doing, any ranking of companies. It's for them, because the commitment we want to see is for companies to accelerate progress and, reach a certain score. We're going to repeat, this year on year, and we're going to have interactive dashboard when we're able to see the state of climate action again for the global business travel sector in a much more granular way. And again, the industry has been demanding those data points, but also the policymakers we engage with in Washington, D.C. and in Brussels primarily, they want to see this progress and this result. So we're really excited about launching this, and we'll certainly keep you posted.
Fantastic. This is very exciting and something we should, keep an eye out for, and definitely open to hearing. Final question. It's a tough one. I recently had a couple of climate activists on this podcast who vehemently say that all business travel must stop. Business travel is the big culprit for emissions, and, it's taking away, making the world much harder for everyone to keep the privilege of the very few business travelers. What do you say to climate activists who believe that it's a season desist time for business travel?
So let me say, first, I have a lot of respect for climate activists and, what they stand for and the work they're doing. They've got an agenda. Again, for us, the fly, don't fly is a fake dilemma. We're going to continue flying. There's no way around it. It's the way our societies work, is the way, we create value for governments, for business, for everyone. So not flying is not decarbonizing travel. And, for us, it's so important to be working on the actual solutions. And these solutions are going to be sustainable aviation fuel. Down the line, it's going to be hydrogen powered plane. It's going to be there are a lot of like solutions. And this is what we want to be working on. Then again, travel needs to be purposeful, and we're not telling everyone, jump on a plane, travel for work. It's fun. No, it's like you need to have a clear return on emission. There are a set of things that you have to do to, like travel more sustainably, and you have to do it, and you need to show this accountability. But again, like travel is here to stay. So we're trying not to, constrain people in terms of fake dilemma, but rather work on solutions.
Love the solution oriented approach. And on that note, let us move to the final bit of this interview, which is the rapid fire round, Delphine, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. So I'd love to hear, for example, what's your favorite airline?
So I'm sorry to disappoint you. Like, I really don't have a favorite airline. Like, I have to say it's going to be the one that brings me like from point A to point B the most efficiently, and I will add sustainably. But for real, like, I not part of any, like miles program.
All right. I will take that politically correct answer. How about your favorite airport?
Then I have to say that I love Roissy-Charles de Gaulle. Just because first it's an airport I've spent a lot of time in, but I love that I can have my La Durée macaroons.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to sound very French, but I feel like when I'm at this airport, I'm in Paris without really being in Paris, but I love the French vibe to the airports.
Very nice. I was there recently, just a few weeks ago, and indeed it has you can't be in any other city but in Paris. While you're there, there was Pierre you can have the hot chocolate, the thick one where you can, slice it with a fork. It's so thick. What about your favorite city?
It's New York City. It's home for me. I've been in New York City for 12 years, first in Manhattan, now in Brooklyn. I love, love, love the city. There is no other city where I would love to live right now.
Okay. Favorite movie?
So I don't really have a favorite movie, but I do love dark comedy and political satire as a type of movies. So when Parasite came out, which I would qualify as this, I really loved
the Korean Oscar winner.
Yes, and more recently, again, like a political satire, Don't Look Up. I have to say, I found it quite eye-opening.
You can apply it to climate change.
Yes.
Exactly. How about your favorite book?
Favorite book? I will say The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So I'm the mom of 2 young kids, and I've been discovering this book with them. I have this book in French, in Portuguese, and in English, which are the 3 languages that we speak at home. And we've been reading it like several times in all 3 languages, and love the message.
You must love this book to have it in 3 languages. I'm going to check it out for my daughters who are still young and love reading right now. What is something you'd like to learn, Delphine?
I would love to learn how to sail. I live very close to the Brooklyn Marina, and we've been talking with my husband about, maybe buying a small sailboat. But I guess, the thing we have to do before that is to learn how to sail, because we don't. So that, could be in the plans.
Let me throw in some motivation here. When you can sail, you can actually sail to Europe. And save all your emissions there.
Efficiency. I think I will continue to love my airline.
Okay, fine. What do you do in your free time?
I do spend a lot of time with my kids. Again, like we love discovering the city, the various neighborhoods, like new restaurants, new places.
Were they born here in New York?
Yes, they're both little, French, Portuguese, Americans.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Check that out. And finally, what is the best advice, Delphine, you received?
I think it's to say yes to the opportunities that scare you the most. I've been finding myself outside of my comfort zone so many times, and I realized that that's the way, I've built confidence, and it's what keeps me excited, keeps me motivated. So, if you've got some crazy plans, just tell me. I will probably say yes.
All right. Well, on that cheerful note, Delphine, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for doing what you're doing for making business travel more sustainable.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Torth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.